Thank you. So I'm Melissa Moeller with the Northwest Agriculture Business Center, and I first learned about the Value Added Producer Grant as a farmer. I was a farmer for 16 years. I started and operated Misty Meadows Farm. We raised certified organic pasture-raised eggs. And in that time, NABC introduced me to this program. I got my first Value Added Producer Grant for turning retired laying hens into soup stock. And then that went so well that I got a second one for bagged compost. My husband said I'd really made it in the world when I was able to start selling people chicken poop. And then my third one was for selling more eggs to more people and more places. And at that time, I decided that I absolutely loved helping other farmers, working with other farmers. I went and got an MBA degree and then began doing this instead. I sold the farm to another farmer, and now I just help farmers access grant programs such as this one. So with me today, I have Carlotta Dionisi and Jeff Peterson, both from USDA Rural Development. They are our business program specialists who, yeah, they are champions. They are the farmers' champions for the Value Added Producer Grant Program. They are the ones who understand how it works and are the ones who will be scoring applications. And then if you're funded, they will help you through that process. So I am thrilled first to introduce you to Carlotta.
Good morning, everybody. I'm glad to be here. Our Value Added Producer Grant is one of our most important grants, in my mind anyway. And through Northwest Ag Business Center, they have been able to really present this to more of an audience, all over the state. And for that, we appreciate Northwest Ag Business Center is really a great resource for ag producers and socially disadvantaged groups and cooperatives. So I just wanted to say that and thank you to NABC. And so what I have is a slide deck of slides for the Value Added Producer Grant. And it is a fairly complicated grant application. So there's a lot of slides. And we're going to try to go through them fairly briefly. We will have questions and answers, so you can type them in somewhere. I don't see it myself, but there's somewhere you can type in questions because we'll be doing that a bit later. And if you are not able to put it in the chat, go ahead and maybe jot down your questions, and then you can come on later when we come to that. So some of these slides I may go through fairly briefly, but just know some of the major items are going to be readdressed by Melissa in slides that seem similar later. So you'll be, maybe hearing things a couple times. But all right, thank you. And let's just get started. What's the purpose of our Value Added Producer Grant? Is to help ag producers successfully process, market, and sell your value-added product. It enables you to take your raw commodity post-harvest and process it and market it, and really earn more earn more revenue for your product. And it expands markets for ag producers, and it really strengthens the rural economy. We're seeing, especially in the last 10 or so years, that especially in Washington State, Western Washington especially, so that the smaller farms and the value added has really exploded. Where I remember many years back, the value added was used a lot by big, huge, large producers. So it's even the smaller projects are really great projects. So we'll go forth now. So there's two types of grants under the Value Added Producer Grant. One is for planning. It's a $75,000 maximum grant, And it covers things like, let's say you're not really ready to hit the road with your product. You're not quite ready. You need a feasibility study. You want to look at it a little more in depth. Or maybe you even want to have a business plan and a marketing plan written up for you. Maybe you have your idea pretty solid, but you really want to have that. You can use it for that purpose. And, it's meant to, you could use a planning grant 1 year, and then the next yearly cycle, which is usually the case, you could apply for the working capital, which is the next one on the slide. And that is a $250,000 grant. And it covers things like operational expenses that are related to your value added product. Just right off the top, a lot of people hear about the value added. And if you haven't heard or learned much more about it, we get all the questions. Can it cover land development, land purchase, building, construction, equipment, processing equipment, and those kind of things? And the answer is no. So it's under the working capital. It's strictly for expenses that come about post-harvest. So you'd be coming into it with your infrastructure already in place, basically, for your farming. So it's not to help with that. It's for that post-harvest. You're ready to process and move forward that way. So it can, cover a multitude of things, which we'll get into a little bit more. I mentioned the grant amounts up there. The grant amount is matched by you. So it's a 50-50 or a 1-to-1 match. So let's say your project is at the largest, 500,000 on the working capital. The grant reimbursement could be 250,000. The other 250,000, and we'll talk about that a little bit more, is covered by the grantee, either with cash, loan, the value of your product that's going into the value added product, and third party contribution, and in kind. And we'll talk again, like I said, let's go forward. Okay, applicant eligibility. This one's important, especially for those that maybe are just starting to get in. We really want you to take this definition to heart. It's very important. So I'm just going to read it, and it's in front of you also. But an individual or entity directly engaged in the production of an ag commodity, or that has the legal right to harvest an ag commodity that is the subject of the value-added product. Ag producers may directly engage either through substantially participating in labor, management, and field operations themselves, or by maintaining ownership and financial control of the ag operation. So although there's a little bit of flexibility there, it's, the words are, we stick to that. So next slide. The applicant types that apply for the value-added producer grant, there's 4 that we have listed here. The first one, independent producers. This is by and large the bulk of our applicants. And so these are the independent producers are owned by yourself and another, or, maybe a couple owners of your own operation and farm. The second one is ag producer groups. And then there's farm and rancher cooperatives. We do quite a few of those in Washington State. And then the fourth, majority controlled producer-based businesses, which we don't see that often, but we can move to the next slides. So independent producer, that is an individual ag producer, an entity that is solely owns and controlled by ag producers. So it could be a husband and wife, could be a couple partners, but basically it's an individual entity. And again, directly engaged in the production of the subject ag commodity. Sole proprietorships, partnerships, LLCs, those type of corporations are typical. And again, at least 85% of our applications we see are independent producers. Next. ag producer group. We have done some value added in Washington State, but as you can see from the logos, this is the type of applicant that would fit this ag producer group, where the majority of the applicants' membership meets an independent producer, and their board is made up majority wise of independent producers, and they work on behalf of the ag producers. Go ahead. Farmer rancher co-ops. So this is the business co-op is controlled by ag producers and organized as a cooperative by the state law. And harvester cooperatives are not eligible. So here below is a few examples, and we have many more. We got the Puget Sound Food Hub listed there, North Cascade Meats Cooperative, but we also have Kitsap Fresh. There, we have quite a few of these, and I really like this type of project because it really spreads the product, out further than either buyer direct or it just seems like there's more buyers, and I like this model a lot. And obviously it's popular in our state. So go ahead. Yeah, the majority controlled producer-based business. Actually, I've never worked on one, and they actually limit the funds for it. So that tells me it's not a widely used type of applicant, but it's a majority of control and financial ownership as independent producers. And then it has some other special eligibility items, but we can move on. So applicant eligibility. For the applicant, you must produce and provide more than 50% of the commodity that will be used for the value-added product. You must own the product from its raw commodity state through the production of the value-added product during the project. I'll just point out, because this has been made a question in the past, is that let's just say you're making pesto. That's your value-added product, and all you're doing is growing. The basil. You don't have to grow all the other ingredients for that value-added product. You only need to produce one of those items, not all the ingredients. And then the other thing I wanted to mention, and it might come up later, maybe, but owning the product from its raw commodity through the final production. So what comes to my mind is that some people send their stuff out to co-packers or some other entity. As long as you're not selling it and losing that ownership of your product from the beginning to the end, co-packaging can work, but that's just something to keep in mind. Go ahead. Just a repeat of the applicant types. And then we go to product requirements, which I touched on a bit. So this is one of the more complicated things. There's quite a few complicating things about this program, but I'll just say right now that there's myself, and really there's 4 other specialists in our state that can also help with individual questions and ideas that you might want to run by us, and also Melissa Moeller and at NABC. So don't get discouraged if we get further in and you're thinking, I don't think this is for me. It's way too complicated. Maybe it isn't too complicated. So stick with us. Okay, so product requirements. Show value added to the commodity in one of 5 methods. And that's going to come up on the next slide, I think. And then you have to also show an increase in your customer base, and you must show an increase in revenue due to the value-added product. So that means when you're applying and you're filling out there's a lot to fill out, but you're going to describe how you're going to increase your present customer base for what you're selling, and how you're going to increase the customer base, and you're making your estimate based on your business planning and all that. And also the same for revenue. So that's an important piece in the application. And it's lined out exactly where to put it, I think in 2 places, but this is the important thing to remember, to be thinking ahead of what the purpose of the value added producer grant are basically these 3 things. Let's move. So the 5 methods that I mentioned just prior to adding value to your product are these that are listed. It's important to, when you're filling out the application, there's a little like check boxes. You could check these off, and then you have to explain in much more detail and provide a lot of support documentation, which is the reason why you want to pick one. One of the methods to add value. It may be 3 methods, but pick one and then use, spend your time and your efforts and your quality documentation of how you're using that method to add value. So here's the list, the physical state. So that would be, I think we're going to explain this in some following slides, so I'll wait for that. The next would be enhanced production methods, and then product segregation. I think that's the farm, on the farm, and then renewable energy, and then locally produced, marketed, and distributed. So here's where I'll say renewable energy. We've done that in the past because of the dollar amounts that were allowed under the project, but we do have a Renewable Energy for America program, also called REAP, with a lot of funds. In fact, 10 times the amount in past years, thanks to the Inflation Reduction Act for 9 more years. So I probably wouldn't focus on using renewable energy under the value added. For by and large in our state, we use the applicants have used the locally produced, marketed, and distributed method a lot in this state, as well as number 1. But yes, so physical state change is an irreversible process that alters the commodity and enhances the value. So some simple examples is milk into cheese, and actually could be wool into clothing, livestock into packaged cut meats, that kind of thing. So that's just 3 of who knows, hundreds of examples could be made. Go ahead. The second, this physical, that's just an example of some of the products that have used physical state. Method 2, enhanced production. This is where it's under a recognized set of production practices when growing your commodity. Different market for resulting product. Increased value for product over those produced via the standard practices, standard farming practices. And so the examples would be organic, let's say free range meat or chickens or eggs, pasture raised, and grass fed. So those are some examples of when you would pick that enhanced production. Let's go to product segregation. This is probably one that I don't remember using in our state, but it's when the commodity that you're growing is separated from other varieties. And it also continues from production to processing and then marketing. So, some examples would be, a non-GMO commodity such as corn. Again, I haven't really seen that one, seen the other options much more. And I'll just touch on this, just, renewable energy. Here's some, renewable energy, wind, solar, geothermal, hydro energy sources. There's also energy efficiency improvements under our REAP program. So I wouldn't go forth on value added. I really recommend using our REAP, and also for digesters and biodiesel, although we haven't seen those in some years, but we'll see if the digesters make a comeback, but under REAP. Okay, so here is method 5. This is is used a lot in our state, and I think other states too. So this is where your product is grown, it's marketed and distributed within 400 miles of your farm, basically, or within the state of origin. So let's say you're let's say you were in Spokane. You actually could go 400 miles, into Idaho or wherever 400 miles extends to. Then again, if you do, or just within the state, whatever your reach is going to be, whatever your market, you can meet those. And then you must show increase in revenues versus a normal sales method. So, there's lots of ways of showing that selling your whatever your value added is, and under the locally produced explanation does increase revenues. We've seen that year after year after year. So there's just a matter of documenting it, which is been done, like I said, year after year also. So, but you're just proving that instead of going to the big store and buying it out of the non local or non everything, that you pay more for it. And I know for a fact I do. So examples, any food or food product that customers will pay a premium for locally produced and food product. So in one of the other slides, it said something about an example was like sheep wool to yarn and stuff. So then you wouldn't be able to use that under locally produced food. So just a point, because that's come up a couple times, and we don't want that to happen when it's too late. So go ahead. So again, a repeat of the methods to add value, and just repeating, you're really going to, I have had people that have insisted they really wanted to use two of them and explain both. No problem. That's no problem. You can do that. But just to know that you can get away very easily with using one method that you select. Okay, go ahead, Melissa. The product requirements, and we've went over this I think a couple times already. How you show value, one of the 5 methods. You're increasing the customer base, and you're showing how and that you're going to receive a greater revenue for your value added product in the application. And it seemed like I did zoom through that pretty quickly, but again, some of these are going to be repeated by Melissa, and then we'll have questions also. And then from here, we're going to move to my counterpart, my coworker, Jeff Peterson. Take it over, Jeff. Thanks.
Thanks. Can you hear me all right?
You can.
Good.
This is
Thanks,
the guy from
Carlotta
USDA.
and Melissa and Emily and all. You kind of put this together. I'm here in the Olympia office, as well as Carlotta. There's a bunch of us that work on these as they come up in the application phase, and of course once they're made in kind of the servicing phase. So we all kind of operate under the same rules, but this can be a little complicated. So sometimes we have to even talk amongst ourselves to answer questions. And I see a lot of them popping up there, and we'll try and answer those as best we can when that time comes here. So just moving along here, I guess we'll start with the application types. Some of this is a little bit duplicative from what Carlotta said, but in this case, expanding on the 2 types of grants, planning grants, we see a few of those, but working capital grants are probably where we see most of our applications. Again, like Carlotta said, we've seen folks try and get a planning grant first to kind of get a good feel for what might be ahead of them if they were to undergo a project. and then if successful, taking it to that next phase, they might apply. Still got to apply separately for these, and not in the same year, but they might try and go after it further to get a working capital grant. 3 types of applications. Simplified applications, market expansion applications, probably our most common, and emerging market applications are the 3 that we see. Next slide. The planning grant, again, those can go up to $75,000. These are, again, really to see if this is a project that is going to make sense. It's using these funds to develop the planning activities and determine if it's viable. You don't want to do it if it doesn't make any sense. So, and it's important to point out that a third party does this, somebody that doesn't have a vested interest in this project that you're proposing, to kind of give you another opinion to see if this might work. And these need to be completed in 1 year. Okay, and then moving on to the simplified applications that fall under the working capital grant. These are grant requests that are under 50,000. We see a lot of these. I mean, even though, as you'll see in the other slides, these working capital grants can go up to 250. There's a lot of folks that can make pretty good use of a grant under 50,000, and all 4 types of applicants can do that. No feasibility study or business plan required. I still think I would hope anybody doing a project kind of has a business plan anyway, if maybe not formally on paper, but you don't have to submit either one of those if you've got a grant request under that amount. Again, you still need to demonstrate that you're expanding your customer base, as well as revenues, because that's what it's all about. I mean, if you sell to more folks, you're going to increase revenues. And it's important. I was thinking about this as I was looking through these. These are the kinds of little items that yeah, it's just on paper there, where we're trying to demonstrate that we're going to expand our customer base. Get started thinking about this right now. What have we done historically? Because that's important. It may not rattle right off the top of your head, how many customers you had, and you might have not have organized those thoughts all together. So it's important to get started early on this. So when they do announce that you can start really kind of putting some numbers together. Okay. Again, I guess we have emerging markets. Emerging markets is one of those. I haven't seen a lot of these. I know we get them from time to time, and really where this comes in is for those that are proposing a project where they've been growing it for less than 2 years. So I think the take on this that intuitively, because there's not that history, they do require that independent third party feasibility and business plan as part of the application, because we don't have the historical reference to work with. So whoever put this program together included that as a caveat for if you're going to apply as an emerging market. Most common, next slide, would be the market expansion, and these are folks that have been doing it for at least 2 years. And for these type of projects, independent producers are the only eligible applicant type, going back to those eligible applicants that Carlotta talked about. On this one, a little different than the last slide. A business or marketing plans required, but not a feasibility study. We can still look at a feasibility study, but this one gives a little more latitude in the sense that will allow you to develop a business plan, and I forgot to look at this back in the template. We can talk about this later, but think about that business plan as something that's really useful. This is that, you know, that roadmap that's kind of setting the goals for your project, and how you're going to get there, putting it down in terms of you know, some cash flow projections, some pro forma estimates to show. I mean, otherwise, how else are you going to show that the increased revenue? And that's kind of what comes across in a business plan. If you're trying to sell your wares to, whether you're going to a bank or anywhere, this is really this is showing somebody that doesn't know anything about you how you're going to get it done. So, but again, for this one, market expansion, you don't need the feasibility study necessarily, but you do have to develop that business or marketing plan. Okay. All right, now we're really getting in the weeds here. Purpose, eligibility, use of funds. What can you do with this grant? Planning grants are pretty. There's not a whole lot of different uses for that. You're looking at putting together a feasibility study, your business marketing plans, design for a website, packaging, labels, somebody that kind of helps you look ahead and see what may lie ahead, and maybe even provide some recommendations on how best to get there. The working capital grant, again, these are most of what we see. Maximum is at $250,000. That's the grant side of it. Because it's one-to-one match, you can actually have a project that's $500,000 there, but only 250 of that's going to be grant. Operational expenses, I think we get in the weeds a little bit more in these future slides, but needs to be post-harvest. It's value-added processing, marketing, distribution, those things that happen after you know, the initial production of that, after you've harvested it. We cannot cover any production expenses. Try and keep the word production out of your template as you're kind of putting things together, because that always kind of makes the hair stand up on the back of our necks. Because you know, again, it is something we emphasize all the time. It's post-harvest. So if we get something that we even see the word production, we have to take a closer look at that. And again, we don't want to see tractors and you know, some of that big equipment. We allow for some small type equipment, which I think we get into a little bit, you know, like a computer laptop. Well, I'll get into that further, but again, the matching requirement, 1-to-1. So for every dollar in grant monies that you're going to be requesting reimbursement, you got to match it with some eligible match. Okay. So let's talk about eligible expenses. Processing costs. These are, we see labor a lot, folks that you might have working on, you know, maybe you're making salad kits or something like that. You've got folks in there, they've brought in the raw commodity from the field. You're washing, you're mixing, you're sorting, putting it into a you know, a clamshell or something like that. Utilities, ingredients. Be careful with things like broad like that, utilities. And if I can't emphasize this enough, even some of the broader things below, like bookkeeping, utilities, again, there, we really need you to think about this in the sense that it needs to be, when you're going to budget something into your project there that you're going to be asking for reimbursement, it needs to be directly related to this value-added product in the project that you're working within. So you know, you've already got electricity probably to your buildings and that sort of thing, and you would have it anyway. If you're going to turn in utilities, we really rely on you to provide you know, something very reasonable, justifiable, that is going to kind of allow us to take a basic utility bill and carve out of there what is, what is targeted directly or needed for your value added project. I guess the takeaway that I send here, I really recommend, you can see some of the things here, packaging, labels, supplies, those are easy to assign directly to your project. If you're, again, you're doing salads or something like that, and you're buying clamshells or labels, we know that is going to be directly to your project. But if I guess the other thing I would say too is if you have multiple products on your farm, we need it to be very specific. If you say it's, this one vegetable, it's your squash or something like that, but you also grow other things on your farm that aren't related to this project, we can't pay for those other things. So just kind of keep that in mind when you kind of pick what you're going to do. If you have a multiple vegetables, something like that, we're going to be looking at all of those. But if you have something that's outside that and you're looking for reimbursement, and it might kind of wander, something that's a general kind of bill, like insurance or something like that, we need to make sure whatever it is you're charging in kind of these broad categories that that it can be traced to the actual project and product, and that it affects you from the very beginning to all the way through. Every time you make a draw request, we're always going to ask that. We're going to have to show that what it is that you're charging to your grant can be attributed to the project. I know that was a long-winded discussion, but it's something that's really important. It's going to make things easier on you as you go through the project, and just we want to keep it focused. Okay. Next. All right, and back to ineligible expenses. Construction, definitely not. Equipment, vehicles, as I said, there's some small scale equipment, so long as we can relate it to the project and it falls within that. Again, 5,000 I think is the top of that range. I really urge y'all to try and, on that last slide, to kind of keep them in the more conventional eligible areas, because when we start getting into the equipment side, it starts to get a little more murky there, because this is a working capital grant, and working capital in itself, I'm an old loan officer, that really has more to do with the operational costs than kind of getting a lot of fixed type items that are going to outgrow the the duration of your project. So really try and keep those I would say to a minimum. If it's necessary, if you have a question about it, ask us beforehand as you're applying for these, when you're going through that process. I think it's good to have that understanding. Keep anything, there's the word production, keep that production, harvest, delivery of commodity. We need post-harvest expenses. Engineering, architectural design, don't see it very often, but I have. That's going to be an ineligible cost. You get too many of those wrapped into your project, it can actually cause you to be ineligible for the grant. We don't even move to much more beyond scoring. So in conflict of interest, that's always kind of an important one. There's this next slide's going to show us a definition of that. Go ahead and I'm not going to read the whole thing, but if it feels like conflict interest, that's when you're dealing with maybe a family member might be benefiting from this grant somehow. If somebody else that might have a financial interest that's related in some way, we see that from time to time. in other words, if if your spouse, we can't use grant funds to pay your spouse to work on the packaging line or something like that, but we may be able to use that as in kind, which we can, I think it talks about it in a future slide here, but if there's something that kind of feels like there's an apparent conflict of interest, then it probably is. If there's something that you have a question about, share that with us up front too. That's always good before things get too far along and you have somebody in Indiana that's reviewing this application, and they might look at it and maybe they don't have a full understanding of it, but that can be create an ineligible cost. So we don't want to see that. Okay, next. Matching, as we've said, it's got to be 50%, at least 50%. And it kind of follows the same eligible cost format that we see on the grant side of things. Although there is some it comes it can come in different forms. It's important to know that those matching funds need to be spent in advance of the grant draw request. So if you come to us in the first part of your draw or of your project, and you've proposed matching funds of $2,000 in product that say you're growing tomatoes or something, you're making tomato sauce, and you've come to us with a request of $4,000 in packaging materials. If you've only grown at that time $2,000 worth of tomatoes, it hasn't been spent in advance. And that can get tricky sometimes. There's ways we can kind of work through that. It doesn't mean we can't pay for some of those things later when you do get kind of caught up on the advance on the match side. But you really want to try and pace your project so you're able to get reimbursed for things timely because you've got the match there. I think that's kind of what we're getting at. Again, no conflict of interest as far as the matching, and that goes to where you might have an employee that's a family member or something like that. That can be used as in kind, but on only up to 25% of the total project. I think we get into that a little bit later. And verified at application, confirmed at award. Really what that means is we need to kind of the forefront of this thing established what that match is going to be. We've verified it. If you're going to have some cash match there, we're going to ask that we have I don't know what the bank statement timeline is there, but we're going to be looking at something that shows that money is in an account and is a current representation of that, having that money available. And it still needs to be in place, not just at application, but if we get to the point where we award you, we would confirm that again. Okay. All right, eligible sources, kind of alluded to that just a little bit earlier. Applicant cash, you might have a loan available, and that's up to you what you put in there. It helps with scoring. Actually, does it, Carlotta? I'm going to ask you to. They changed that a little bit. I think actually we'll move. We'll talk about that a little bit later because that's changed over the last couple of years. Sorry, I had kind of a brain cramp there, but
that's okay. Last year, Jeff, you got 2 points if you provided entire match in cash. 1 if you did half in cash. Most people don't. Most people are going to use the in-kind labor and in-kind commodity.
Yeah, and so I think that and I think it shows the scoring in the template there. Like I say, that got a little confusing for us because it's changed over the years, but there is a benefit to it. I guess that's the takeaway
Yes.
there. And the extent to which it benefits you, you can kind of read through that scoring rubric there that I think they have in the template. And the value of the raw commodity, this is always this is what's cool about this program. You're already growing this, and you actually get credit for match for what you were growing anyway, and donating to this project. So you know that do your due diligence in trying to value that thing. We're trying to see in its rawest form there what that's worth, and that might be looking at marketing service data, that sort of thing, not what it's out there in the store retailing for. We want to see what that is valued at a raw commodity. Super important, because that's what this project's all about. You getting a lot more for that raw commodity than you would if you were just selling a cow on the hoof. You're doing something to it. So do your homework and try and give us a good, supportable example of what your product is worth. Applicant or family in-kind labor, like we said, if you're using a family member there, somebody that's related, you can use that as match. As it shows at the bottom, that maximum is 25%. Third-party cash, maybe somebody's kicking in a little something for your project there. They want to see your farm succeed. We still have to verify that, but that's a way to show matches as well. Third-party in-kind contribution. See this from time to time. Sometimes you might have somebody that's giving you doing some consulting, you know, giving you some help on your project with, you know, developing a website or something, and not charging you for it, but it still has a value, and that can be used as match as well. All right, next slide. All right. So here's the toolkit. This was last year's. We don't have this year's yet. We'll get a new toolkit, I assume. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, because I think in the latter part of this presentation, we're actually going to kind of go through this. But I do want to say, you know, as you go through these, I'll let you kind of read through the slides there as far as the work plan and budget. But whatever you do in any of this, if you get a question on any of these, and it looks like duplication where you saw it somewhere else, answer it again and in the same way. But just make sure that you kind of think through all of these things as they are laid out in the application. Try and keep it simple. And you know, when we're evaluating these and scoring them, and later on trying to figure out how to pay you for things, you know, keeping things kind of organized well and simple, and kind of you know, this is why we want to get you started on it early, because there's a lot packed into that work plan and budget. And we have some good help, you know, with the specialist here in our agency, and Melissa through NABC. They have a lot of experience with this, and so I encourage you to try and kind of work through these. Don't miss these items. Who's going to be working on what? The identification of key personnel. All these things are important, but you know, again, if you have a question on something there, please reach out to us there. The agency documents, there's not a whole lot in terms of any, you know, other things beyond the application itself. Application for federal assistance, that's an SF 424. Not a whole lot to that, but what I would recommend, make sure that's consistent with other areas of the application. I've seen people put on the application template a different name that they're applying for, or a tax ID number that they had on the application for federal assistance. Keep them consistent. You need to register for SAM, System of Award Management. That's what the government kind of uses to to track like grants and government contracts and that sort of thing. It's free. It's to get registered for this. I know there's other folks that are probably more familiar with this process, but there are, if you Google, SAM or something like that, you're going to find folks out there that want to charge you to help you put that together. You do not need to do that. We have resources that we can refer you to help you kind of get through that process, but you got to have it as part of this thing. So, and we have some handouts and things that we can give you to help you through that, but get started on that right away. Okay. Grant period, typically, it can't be more than 3 years. A lot of folks I see do them for 2. But I mean, really try and figure out how long it's going to take you to do this. We have the ability to extend that. If you did 2 years and you need a little bit longer, we can do that once, and can't exceed that 3-year period. But that's in the rules. That 3-year thing is a pretty hard and fast thing, and so we really don't have departure from that. So make sure that you keep your project moving along, and as you're thinking about it in terms of how long this is going to take, you want to make your project fit within that. So don't take a project that would take a long time and have it, maybe you need to rethink kind of what you do in the scope of your project so you can keep it within this. Make sure you answer all the questions. That means checking every box that you need to. A signature, oftentimes we see that, and it kind of, it trips us when we see some of these things. Some of them are important certifications. So when you miss something like that, sometimes there's a lot of different sets of eyes looking at these, and it can trip up your ability to get a grant. So make sure you do everything. If you've got a grant already, an active grant, and you're doing something completely different, you got to have that other one finished up. I forget exactly what the time frame is within the application, but it better be just about done. That will be specified in the notice that comes out in terms of when, if you have another grant going right now, at what point that needs to be finished up in relative to the processing the new application. So if that is the case, you should be having a conversation with us. If you've got an active grant and you're thinking about doing a new one, we want to know, is it a completely different project? And 2, when are you going to have that other one wrapped up so it doesn't interfere with your new one? Okay. And I think I kind of hit that, but it needs to be substantially different. If you're doing a new one, it can't be just kind of an extension or, just kind of a slight tweak of what you did before. It really has to be a new project, and it can't look the same as the last one, or just changing just a few things. So again, that's one of those things too. If you're thinking about doing it, you probably have a conversation with us to see if that's going to kind of get over that bar. Next. Okay, this is kind of the process. You're assembling the application now. You're putting it together. Somehow it makes it to us either through the mail or submitted electronically. Read the notice carefully in terms of what those timelines are. Preferably, you've got us looking at it. We get busy with a lot of things, not even just VAPG, but we're entering our grant season as we turn after the first of the year. So we're working on a lot of different things. Get them to us early. The more that time you give us, the better feedback we can give you. So I recommend that. Get started on that right away. The scoring process, there's a lot that goes into this. We have to do our scoring here at the state level, and then we actually send it, we upload them, and we get folks from around the country. I don't know, maybe they used to work for the agency, but there's actually other scorers that they don't know anything about Washington, or they might, but they've got, they're just getting paid to look at your applications. And so our score, and then there's 2 other scores out there that will be looking at your project. So again, make sure you get everything filled out there, because when those folks look at it, you know, there's no change in it once you send it to us. So there's very little we can change after it's been submitted. Maybe some slight things, but it's pretty rare. And after that, if we get notified by the national office that your application was successfully scored, you had a score high enough to you know, to beat some of the other folks out, we're going to get in touch with you. And this is the government. We'd love to have lots of time. I know we have lots of demands, but there's going to be times when we send you this paperwork out, and just because of the way the funding works or whatever, we may need that back pretty quickly. So, and we're happy to answer questions on stuff, but just be real, I guess, attentive to when we need stuff signed, because sometimes that money is only available for a certain window to get that money set aside for your project. So we'll you know, we work in a lot of different ways to get that accomplished, but just pay attention to it. And then there's the project. That's the fun part, where we get started and you know, we have conversations about how things are going. You'll have some reporting to do. You know, we'll go through reimbursements. We like to, we can get pretty involved in that. Like even in the front end of that, we'll kind of show you what we're looking at, how we go about it. That's important to know, because, you know, you can send us an email with some receipts and that sort of thing, but there's kind of a lot that has to go on for us to get that project, or to get that draw ready to get you reimbursed. Somebody else, you know, there's an approval official involved. So it's important in how you set up your grant from the very beginning, to you know, how you operate it after that. It will make things, you know, just run more easily for you to get your money back and get you on your way, because that is what you want. It is a grant project. It is subject to IRS income. It's reported on a 1099. So if you have questions about that, talk to your accountant about that. We're not tax experts here. You know, I just recommend, if you have any, you know, how that might affect your tax liability, you look at that when you get started with this thing, and so you have a clear idea. You have some open eyes as far as what to expect there. Okay, next. Scoring considerations, again, these are all, you know, going to be, there's a lot that goes into these. I mean, I'm not going to read them back to you, but, you know, I give you kind of the same advice there. If you've got something, if they're asking it in one area, and it's somewhere else already in the application, you might just end up writing it down twice, but just make sure there's consistency. It's kind of like a resume. When you talk about something like qualifications of personnel, you know what your project is. You want your qualifications to match up with folks that can pull this thing off. So, you know, whether it's using a contractor to help set up a website, are they good at it? What are their you know, what are their qualifications? If you don't have the personnel right now, you got to hire somebody down the road. Okay, you don't know who that is when you're applying for this, but you can tell us what those qualifications are. I'm going to hire a marketing person to go to farmers markets and talk. Well, you want in your application, even though you haven't hired them yet, you want to put those qualifications down. So those are little things that can really help you score well. You know, one of the best things.
If I could just add something, Jeff,
Go ahead.
I just wanted to read. I'm not sure how many people that are on have looked at an actual application template, and I just want to insert real quickly that when you look at that application template, it does look overwhelming, but it gives a very clear description, like in the scoring area that you're actually typing in. Above it, it's giving very detailed information about what that section is worth as far as a score, like number 1 is worth 30 points. And it details how we look at it as far as how we're going to score it. If you address all the things that are like in that one, because that's one of the highest scoring sections, it actually tells you if you, and it's very important, I recommend you very carefully read each of the areas, the sections right above that nature project that you're going to be typing in and giving your info, because it's actually telling you what we are looking for. So if you carefully address and be able to support it and explain it clearly, that is the higher, you're going to be reaching the higher score. And that's the name of the game as far as applying and competing against all the applications nationwide. So I just want to point that out because I've seen it time and again. People are asking us questions, but they could read that. I know it looks overwhelming, but just remember my words, sort of zero in on those areas where you have to do the typing in of the info and really read it, because that's what we're asking for. We're actually kind of telling you up front. So that's what I wanted to insert there, and I'll jump back out.
That's great point, Carlotta. We talked earlier about, cash match. What does that do for you? That's an example in there. As you read through that in that template, it's going to talk about, what that does to your overall score. And that, we've had applications that come down to, a half a point or a tenth of a point or whatever. You're competing against people all over the country. So you really want to maximize this. Thank you for saying that, Carlotta, because, that's where the rubber meets the road on this, in terms of getting funded relative to others out there that are trying to do the same thing. So read that carefully. All right. What do we got next?
Questions. Okay. So there have been some questions coming in for the two of you that I wanted to go over and have you address while we still have you here. Are there resources for people who can help with the planning part of the planning grant? Where and how would we get a feasibility study?
Okay, so we get to ask.
Go ahead, Carlotta.
Jeff, are you going? Okay.
No, I'm gonna have a drink of coffee here.
Okay. So we get asked that a lot. So we don't have like a readily available list of people that you could or should call for resources for planning grants. But, honestly, we can look at maybe some past ones and there's a few contractors, let's say, that have done feasibility studies or maybe helped with business plans, that we can probably come up with some names, but I don't have any to list off the top of my head at this moment. That would be a conversation that you could reach out to me or Jeff or even Melissa directly.
Yeah, and I would
Please
say
do.
NABC would be one of those resources, potentially depending on capacity. There are other groups such as SCORE or Northwest Business Impact. I would look at, people who do business planning services in your area and see what they would have to help you with that. With the planning grant, those funds are for paying to have that service done, and you would need to contribute half of that. For the emerging market grant application, you would need to have that feasibility study done before applying. Does this grant cover trout, eggs, or fish farming industry? Carlotta?
Okay. So I think that the person that asked this question, excuse me, has left, so we may have to recontact him.
Okay.
But aquaponics and what's the other word? Aquaponics, which falls under aquaculture. That could be, it could be an eligible project, depending on what the person was actually doing with it. So hopefully we can reach back out to him for that. Go ahead.
If you qualify for multiple methods of production, I think what they mean by, value add, how do you decide which one to select? Is one considered better than the others?
Okay, so we did talk about that. There's not one that is considered better at all. It's really your ability to explain how you're adding value and what method you're using. So if you pick one over another because one seems like maybe it's harder to explain or something, that's not, you will not get additional points for that. So you would just pick the one that you feel is strongest. So if you had two, pick the one that you think fits the strongest. And also, honestly, you could, if they both were strong, pick one that you feel would be easier to well document.
Yeah, because there's no additional points for selecting multiple methods. It's like Carlotta said, really, whichever one you feel like you could tell the best story about how you are adding value to your commodity with that method. Pamela asks, locally produced food method, what is normal sales method? Just whatever you're currently doing, or is there a standard?
So I think that goes back to this. There was a slide that used the verbiage, and maybe you can help Melissa, but
Yeah, really what they're asking is how do you determine your commodity value? And I think the easiest way to do that is the Agricultural Marketing Service website is going to list the USDA commodity value for your product. If your product isn't in there, or if it's a protein, other methods would be looking at something that's not a value-added version of what you're growing. For example, not organic beef versus organic beef. What are the prices that people pay for that? But if it's and correct me if I'm wrong here, Jeff and Carlotta, if it's a vegetable or a fruit, it's most likely going to be in the AMS website, and that's the number that you should use.
I would agree with that. Yeah. The best resources there, are those that are publicly, kind of available, whether it be, local, because those AMS, the marketing service, are really, kind of they're generally a good measure because they're taking that commodity from a large number of producers, and it really gives you a good idea in most cases of what that project or that product is prior to it having value added to it. If you have something unique, it's that becomes that's the kind of thing if you're having trouble valuing it, I think that's a good kind of preliminary question to talk to us about, or have us, look at maybe what you've put together, because that kind of can follow you, throughout that's match that's going to be provided over the next several years, and I've seen cases where that match, may change a little bit depending on what, that the product. Sometimes there's cyclical nature of prices and that sort of thing, but it's a really important aspect to your project, and give it that attention in the front end of this thing, in terms of how you support that, because it affects you all the way through, and it's a really big starting point, as well as just the units that you're talking about. If you're doing cattle, is it in in pounds, or per head, or gallons of milk or whatever. Choose those units wisely because we have to work with those throughout the project too. There's without having to convert a bunch of different things, and some projects are more complicated, but really do kind of think that through when you start this thing out.
Okay. On eligible expenses for working capital funds, can the funds be used to pay for rental of processing facilities, renting warehousing, freezing, or cold storage?
Yes,
Yeah.
to really all those things are eligible expenses.
I would say as long as it's not a lease to own, right? You can rent it, but you
Correct.
can have it be leased to own.
Correct.
Yeah, I think, yeah, Melissa, the only thing I'd kind of add to that too is kind of when I was harping on the product itself. If you know, we want to make sure that that space or whatever it is or a processing, we can directly attribute to the product. So, you know, if you have a project that involves beef or something, but you're renting a space, maybe you also grow pork, or you know, you have pork products or something else, and you're also storing all that. You know, we would want to see a reasonable allocation that would go directly to the product. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're gonna really need to know your percentage. If in this case, beef is 40% of what you're producing, then and if it's only going to use 40% of the space, then 40% of the cost of that rental would be covered. But if it's only storing beef, then 100% would be covered.
Yeah, and I think the same could be said of, you know, that would go across if you're going to markets and you're taking the pork and the beef, you know, and you're charged a fee. There too, we might justify having kind of an allocation between, you know, what you're doing there.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah. Can this grant be used to purchase equipment for processing?
So if it's a small, under $5,000 value, it can be included in the total project costs. I think Jeff discussed that pretty thoroughly. And also just to point out, like, let's say there's a series of processing pieces of equipment. You can't do like, oh, this one's worth 1,000, this one's worth 3,000, this one's worth whatever, another 1,000, and treat them separately. If they all work together, you can't add them all up and say, oh, it's all under, you know, each one is under 5,000. So we have to be a little bit careful there. So again, it goes back to getting in your head what you want to use the money for and talking to one of us, you know, specifically before you start typing in and finalizing your numbers.
Do processing costs include the cost charged by a co-packer?
Yes, you can use co-packer expenses, and whenever I hear co-packer, I just want to remind people that you can't lose ownership of your product while it's being processed, packed, or whatever.
I think that next one was answered in the presentation, but just want to reiterate it. What is the time horizon for the working capital grant? Could I use the grant for packaging, labeling expenses for the estimated amount of products I plan to produce for the next 3 years, 5 years, longer?
Well, the value added producer grant, if you're awarded, is a specific period of time not to exceed 3 years. So whatever you're doing, if it's a working capital, 3 years would be the maximum that you would be addressing the grant and reimbursement process. If you continue doing whatever you do past that, then that's you're on your own. I think
Yeah,
that's the
be
answer.
careful with it. Yeah, be careful with that too, Carlotta. Sorry to interrupt, but you want those expenses that you're projecting to fall within that grant period. If there are things before the grant starts or after the grant starts, we could look at those as ineligible expenses, and that can, if there's enough of those in there when we're reviewing them, it can disqualify the application. So make sure those expenses fall within that window of the grant period.
Good point.
How is the value of applicant of family member in-kind labor determined?
I think we want to see something that is supportable, reasonable for that type of activity. Oftentimes we'll see applications that include something from Department of Labor statistics. What is the average salary for somebody in, you know, a similar industry? You know, is it reasonable and supportable in that manner?
I usually use Glassdoor or Salary.com. Do either of you have an opinion on those as resources?
I don't know anything about
I
it.
don't, other
actually.
than, I don't either. I guess if it seemed in line, like, let's say you compared that, a couple of those, jobs to that's in the Bureau of, the other one that Jeff mentioned, I forget, Bureau of Labor or whatever, and they seem real close, then that'd be fine. I'd probably be interested to just, compare them a little bit, but I'd be okay with it if they were close.
If the applicant is a co-op, whose labor can be considered in kind? Can it be any member of the co-op?
We might have to
So
get
I'm
back
not
to you on that one.
100% on the answer there. Yeah, I might have to get back. I believe because yeah, I really want to answer that separately to the applicant, I
Yeah.
think, because it does
Yeah,
get a
let's
little
take
bit
that one.
tricky.
Good question, though.
Is there a production history level requirement for the planning grant? Business history requirement, years? For the planning grant?
No. Basically, you still have to fit the definition of an ag producer. And I think that definition was on one of the slides pretty far up in the beginning when I started presenting. That piece would have to be, met. And
Does
so,
that template
yeah,
kind of walk
that's
them through that too, Carlotta? In the planning grant?
specifically,
template?
I don't recall on that. Specifically, I
I
don't
kind of
recall
think it
on that.
does, but
Yeah, I think because it's a planning grant,
But-
it could be a brand new venture, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, it could, but they still have to meet the definition of a ag producer. So I think that's the answer.
Laura asks, we have a blueberry farm that offers U-Pick. Could we use the price that U-Pickers pay for blueberries as the raw value of the blueberries for the match?
Well, I think I'm going to let you answer that, Melissa.
Yeah, I would say no. I mean, you could make an argument for that if, you have a certain value that U-Pickers are paying you and now you're going to start selling at retail. I think you would be much better off using the AMS marketing service number. It's an outside independent USDA provided number that I think it's gonna help you score better.
100%, Melissa. Good job.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's see. Somebody asks if they can apply for 2 value-added products. No, you got to pick one. Oh, and Emily posted the AMS website link at 10:11. If anybody sees that there, if they want to look and see what their commodity value is. Let's see, are there USDA? Well, I guess that's about another program. Yeah, are there USDA grant programs for value-added equipment? Again, this is a working capital or market expansion.
Possibly you could look at State Department, Washington State Department of Ag.
That's true.
Possibly.
The infrastructure grants, right? That have been coming up in Washington State. But that would be a different program.
WSDA.
Yeah. Do herbal teas qualify as value-added products? Say yes.
Yes.
Grant be applied to commercial fisheries or farm only?
as long as those herbal, I think there's still something in the reg there if they claim to have like medicinal qualities, or isn't there something about that can hang things
Correct.
up?
But if it's just strictly
medical
herbal,
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
medical is a different thing, and it probably don't want to be involved in that. But herbal is okay.
Right. Does hard cider qualify?
Yes. Of course, they have to have all the
Yeah.
state alcohol regulatory things in place, but we've done quite a number in our state of hard cider as well as wine. So yes.
Is that a
And
is
then
that a state
the
or
other
a federal
question,
thing? What is isn't there a isn't there a federal something or other, or maybe I'm confusing that with something else.
I think the important thing
Mm.
is to make sure you have all your proper licensing, right? And
Yeah,
demonstrate that.
and that, yeah, and I think it is state, but I guess that doesn't matter at this minute. And the other
It
question
it
was
will
about,
it will. There's a question in the template that asks if it involves alcohol or something like that. And
And
I
if you
think it
have,
talks about the required documentation.
okay, just want to kind of move through these fairly quickly so that we can get on to.
there was a question I don't think we answered though, the commercial fishing. So, that would fall under, probably, I think the question would fall under, harvesting. So if they have the right to harvest fish, they definitely can apply, and that can be an eligible, project. And in fact, I've worked on a couple of those. So if the person asks that, can feel free to give me a call. We can talk about that.
Yeah, good, good. Let's see. Oh, I guess we'd skipped a question. Could the matching funds be a line of credit? And the answer was yes, it definitely can be. Let's see, repeat the name of the marketing service. If you scroll back up through the chat, you'll see a direct link to that website. It is the USDA Agricultural Marketing Service, AMS. And the reminder that there will be an annual infrastructure grant for WSDA opening up every year. We just missed that, but watch for that for next year. Would seeds be considered a value-added product?
I think so. I don't.
I think so.
Um,
I think we had one a long time ago.
yeah,
Uh, and then because you're packaging them and however you're marketing them. So I am pretty sure that the answer is yes. And again, if the person's close to doing a project like that, get a hold of one of us here right away.
Well, I want to thank both of you for being here. It is so wonderful to know that farmers have such amazing support in USDA Rural Development Office. We're going to take a 5-minute break, and when we come back, we will have a panel of farmers who have received value-added producer grants, and they are going to tell you their stories and encourage you to apply for one as well. Be right back.
thank y'all.
Thank you. Well, welcome back, everyone. I am excited to have this panel of farmers here to speak to you. We have 3 different farmers who have each received a value-added producer grant. In one case, we have a farmer who has received 3 back-to-back value-added producer grants. So I'm excited to let them tell you their stories. We're going to start with Dorcas Young. Dorcas, if you can share your picture of you and tell us who you are and what you grow.
Okay, let me do this. I want to share some things as I go by there. I don't know, anybody, can you guys see me?
Yes.
Okay, my name is Dorcas Young and I'm a founder of the Sadie Farm. So I started my farm many years ago and I keep trotting along. So for somehow I was taking all these WSDA classes because I didn't have any money to start what I was doing, but I grew up in a farm. So, and I think it was in 2016, I attended a class, a workshop with Jeff Waltz. It's 2015, I think, with Jeff Waltz and Melissa Moeller. I was so intrigued by this offering. It was just like this. And I was like, I need something like this. And they signed up for training. And then I joined in. It was not easy at first, but the thing that made me go on was these 2 people, Melissa Moeller and Jeff Waltz, encouraging. And I was only applying for 50,000 to make kale chips, and which I'll show you the picture. I think I can try to share screen. I'm gonna try to do something here. Let me do something like this. I'm gonna try to show you guys. This was my first value-added grant that I got for 50,000. I made kale chips. This was in 2016. And then I went ahead and keep going. It helped me to be able to stand on my grounds because selling vegetables just raw was not easy and it was difficult. And I'm telling you, the class was amazing. Jeff and Melissa, one of the most patient people I worked with, encouraging all those teams that was in there for us. And we keep going and we keep going. At the end, we were awarded. So I did that. And then the next grant was, I think was the next one was 2020 grant. I went back again. I took that class and then working with the Melissa Moeller and the other team. So we took that class, all of us, a lot of people in there. So let me show you, my second grant was, 250,000. I grew fava beans. And then we're selling them just like that. The first box, anyway, they're like this, and we're selling them just like that. And then we had the other beans. There were about 3 beans, but mostly I focus on these 2 items, the fava beans and not the scarlet runners. The scarlet runner is one of the beans that we grow. And then the COVID hit, and it was tough. So we just changed the state of the products. My first grant of 250,000 for 3 years, and I put everything together. I simplified, I formulated the product, and I got WSDA licensing, which I already have. I just endorsed the frozen items, and we did them frozen, and it was good. It was very good. We pushed marketing, working hard on it. So that's my second one. And then I started to say, okay, the fava beans were not selling, and I formulated this product. It's a pesto. It's 3 flavors. We have this one with just ordinary with herbs because we grow the herbs, and I have the other one with which we add pine nuts and other things. So we formulated this in 2021, and then I started to work on it at the farmers market, and people liked the product, and we started documenting, recording it, and see how much we're selling on it, and it was very good. It helped us to survive the storm of the COVID-19 plus the other one that I had. So we keep going on it, and it was good. And then I just applied the last grant, and I just got awarded. This is my 3rd one. And I just grow fava beans, and I use them into developing value-added products. So that's where I am right now with my 3rd grant, which I'm just surviving because it just helps a lot. It helps a lot.
Thank you. Cameron Green, can you tell us our story about your grants and what you grow?
Yes. Hi. Oh my. Hi. My name's Cameron Green, and my husband and I have a small certified organic farm in the Methow Valley, and we've been farming here for 15 plus years. And in 2020, I applied for my first value added grant to do sauerkrauts. So we grow cabbage, and then our change in the state of the product is to make sauerkrauts. We have an on-site farm kitchen that's all USDA approved. And yeah, same as what Dorcas was saying, the ability to grow our business and specifically to grow the value-added products over the last 2 years since I received my first VPAG in 2020 has been significant. Yeah, like just such an addition to our all of the vegetables that we already grow. And what it really did for us is give us a year-round product. So to take a raw commodity that, you know, maybe we could get $1 a pound at selling fresh at farmers market, but to turn it into something that, you know, once as far as like a gross value, we get somewhere between $8 and $9 a jar, which is huge. That's a huge jump from $1 a pound to almost, you know, $8 a pound of cabbage into a jar. And this past year, I applied for another VPAG, and was just awarded in September for my second to change our raw commodities of hot peppers into a cultured chili sauce. So yeah, and sounds similar. They're similar in the way that we change the product, but two very different products. And our hope with the chili sauce is it's a lot more stable to be able to ship nationwide. So to get out of our region, which yeah, I'm very excited to see what will happen there. And just in a nutshell, I would say it's a lot of work up front to do the application, to work through that. I think having somebody to help you, whether it's from your local rural development office or somebody like NABC, that is definitely the thing that's hard, the application. But once you're in, you're just doing it, and then you have the security that you're going to get your money back, which helps then reinvest in your business. That's what we've been doing for our farm. So yeah, I highly recommend this. The pain of the application process is worth the end result if you are awarded. So
Thank you. Grayson, tell us about your project.
Yeah, hi folks, Grayson. I run Pink Moon Farm. I'm out in Eatonville. We've got right around 3 acres of veggies, about 22 acres in total, with laying hens and sheep as well. I am kind of a newbie, I guess, to the VAPG grant. I just was awarded my first one, this past fall. And the grant that I was awarded for is for really the value add is locally grown vegetables. So in this case, I worked with Melissa, which is why I'm saying we a couple of times here. But we focused on kale, heirloom tomatoes, and carrots. I can talk more about the decision making behind that. But really the point of that grant and kind of how I found it was through another farm business class that I was in with NABC. I think I'd kind of heard it around the neighborhood from other, farm colleagues and friends. And it kind of seemed like a good opportunity to, expand a little bit and grow the business without taking on as much financial risk. And I think the other goal, my business is entering our 6th year now, is kind of the long range questions around how do I continue to professionalize and build a business that, works for me and my employees and kind of gets to a steady state. So yeah, I can share more about that thinking, but yeah, I'll leave it at that for now. Thanks.
Yeah, I would say continue, Grayson. Yours is different than the others, and that all the others are very much what we traditionally think of as value added products, right? Changing things from one state to another, whereas your value added is that you're selling locally.
Yeah, and I think I was really I kind of saw the grant and didn't think it was for me and my business because I don't right now want to produce like a traditional value added product like the other folks were talking about. And it was this presentation probably last year, and I think it was someone from Boldly Grown Farm that was talking about their application that I was like, oh wait, that's for me too. So yeah, for us, we're really again focused on kale, heirlooms, and carrots. The heirloom tomatoes, just because the demand for that product is super super high, and then kale and carrots because the demand remains high for that across our market channels, and we can wholesale them really easily. So that was kind of the thinking behind that. Right now we sell at a farmer's market, CSA, and then also to some food hubs. And for our grant, it can be a little bit of a mind stretch to think about where and when the value add starts. But for us, it's really as soon as that product is hitting the wash pack, that is changing from a raw product to a product that we are washing, we are packing, whether that's being packed into a CSA box, whether that's being, packed and brought to a restaurant, whether it's packed and brought all the way up to Seattle to the farmer's market that we go to. That's sort of that's the value add. So I encourage you, even if you're thinking like, oh, I don't know, do I qualify? Even if you don't do it this year, it's worth it to kind of kick the stones over to think about it. Because I think it's already changing the way I'm thinking about my business. And, I think it's going to be really helpful for us coming into our kind of maturity now that we're like in kindergarten as a business in year 6. So, yeah.
So for all of you, what was the application process like? Talk a little bit about some of the challenges that you experienced in putting together your application. Dorcas, you want to go first?
Yes, like I said, okay, okay. Like I said, when I started really, I grew up in a farm, of course, but I never encountered this. So I was here, my husband is a school teacher, and we were trying to do the ends meet. And then stumbling on this was so critical for me to focus. It was, at first, I didn't know what I was doing. Then I had to go back. I have to ask for extra help from the team. And then Jeff Walls and Melissa, they were so patient with me because I had no idea what I was doing. And I was going to school at that time, School of Food Science in University of Washington in Pullman. And I was just like, wow. Then when I connected this together, and I thought, yeah, I can do something. This probably will help me. And that's what I did. The application was hard at first, because you have to come up with all this data, you have to come up with the budgets, and you have to put it all together, and you have to answer all these questions, and you have to validate some of the questions that you have to put it in there. And I kept on going, and I kept on asking for help, assistant, and asking questions. If I didn't understand a question, I just wait, or I send it to Melissa, or I send it to a team, because I think there were 15 at the first one we have. And I just stayed on. I would drive to Mount Vernon for the whole day to ask questions, to wait for them when they finish their work. And I just sat there and wait and said, I have a question. He said, oh, we didn't know you here. I said, yeah, I just came here because I have to get you guys after you finish so that I can ask this question. That's how tough it was. But I believed that if I do this, this will help me to stay at home raising the kids, as well as building this job, because I didn't know what I would do if I don't have anything to support my family. Whatever the extra dollars that I was getting from it was very valuable to me. So it was tough at first, but I keep going, and I keep it. The first grant I got, $50,000, was a big uplifting for me. I felt more encouraged than ever before. And then they did the classes while I was like now, I joined in just to go and listen and to go and take notes. I was not applying. I just joined in and take notes. And then I said, okay, the next one I was ready, and I said, I'm going to apply for this one. That's what I did. During this offering, the NABC offer the classes like this, the workshop like this. Sometimes I just came without going to apply, just to take the notes. And then those notes helped me to go to the next one that I did, the second one, because I had a better understanding then. And I formulated my product very simple. I said, what about this? If it looks like this, can it make sense? And it did make sense. And it was tough at first, but the grueling of, like Grayson said, he just started. The next one, you'll be good at it. The next one you'll be good at, and then you'll have a precise how we want this thing to work to help you. That's how I did it. It was tough, but I keep going. Even right now, I'm going to keep going because it's a good thing to help small farmers like us to build something, even to pay ourselves, $5 or $2. It's something.
Yeah, so Dorcas is on her third VAPG. The first one was 50,000 and the second was 250, and now she's got a third one for 250. So she has really been growing her business phenomenally well. She's an incredibly hardworking farmer. Cameron, you wrote your applications on your own without the assistance of a nonprofit. Tell us how about that process.
I did, and I didn't really know what I was getting into, but I will say I do feel like rural development has a lot of resources. I was very lucky to have Veronica Bear help me immensely with both of my applications. So I would write it up, I would do all the things that Dorcas was referring to, create the plan, think about how am I going to make this go from raw commodity to finished product, what's the steps in between. And I think I applied, both of my grants are the simplified working capital grants. So I don't need to have like a formalized business plan, even though we do have one for our farm. And I didn't have to have the feasibility study because we've been in business for several years. So for me, that was a lot more simple. Now that I've gotten two, I'm already like, ooh, maybe it is time to go for one of the bigger $250,000 ones, which that's a big chunk to take off. But I think what I have learned from both and doing it myself is definitely don't be afraid to use the resources of USDA. And two, I think I think for both of them, the questions that are meant to be answered are all there. It's just working through the terminology of the grant and recognizing repetition is really important. So they want to know, like, and in all of the different segments of the application, there's a lot of space to just keep repeating. This is how I'm changing my product. This is how I'm gonna increase my production, both on the farm and within the value added, the after state, the changing of the state by adding employees. This is how I'm gonna package it. So I also kept my grants fairly simple. So most of what I'm using them for is to help me with labor costs and then also packaging costs. So new labels, bottles, and then marketing, expanding my marketing with a new website and online store, and then also packaging materials to help me ship nationwide, hopefully. So yeah, I think for me, the big thing was just like not trying to write something new for each of the different sections, but referring back to what I had already written and bringing that down so that that is contiguous throughout the whole application. And that, I think, was really Ronnie helping me be like, you got to keep just saying the same things. It sounds kind of boring, but just keep the process of how you're doing things consistent with other parts of the application. So I think that was really helpful advice. And then I think keeping it simple is also helpful. And don't underestimate the value of getting those at the end of the application in the appendices, like having your letters of support from different, whether you're already working with a supplier, or in my case, I got letters of support from other farmers who were like, yes, we will grow cabbage for you if to help you reach your goals if our farm wasn't able to do enough of that. So yeah, I think having those letters of support was also really helpful. Yeah.
Thank you. Grayson, I think people are really interested in what it means to add value by just selling it locally. Could talk to us a little bit more about your project.
Yeah, it is what you just said. Yeah, it is. It is all ready to eat. I saw that question in the chat. It's not transformed as a product into like a paste, sauce, whatever. We are harvesting kale, carrots, and tomatoes the same way that we always have. The difference is that the funds for this grant are allowing us to better brand and market that locally. It's really not much of a change from what we're doing right now. It's just in the grant, we're writing that I wrote, it's expanding our CSA shares. It is neatening up our market display. It is rebranding and website for, boxes for wholesale, branded twist ties, things like that are kind of clean things up and elevate it a bit more. But again, it is essentially the same bunch of kale that we produced in 2023 that's still being marketed locally. So that really doesn't change for us. Yeah, I don't know if
You're able to reach more customers. So, that's right.
exactly.
You're expanding your market.
Yeah, and I think to speak to the question about the application itself, it is a good time before you get super deep into the application to ask yourself, how is your record keeping? Because, in that grant application, we really had to show, we're selling to this many restaurants and food hubs and yada yada. And this is, how I expect that to increase with the funds from this grant. And if you don't have those sorts of numbers, I don't think it's a no, but it might be a little bit more challenging. And you probably can find that. It's just a question of like how long it's going to take you. So maybe like a trial run at that isn't a bad idea. I found the application itself, I had support from Melissa. We worked together on it. I found it to be a really helpful exercise in thinking through what my business is going to look like in 3 years and then maybe 5 years. And it was well timed for kind of the age of my business and where I'm at right now. So even if I didn't end up getting it, it ended up being a pretty helpful exercise of like, oh, what would it look like if we did this and invested in that and moved the business this way? And then, oh, wait, no, that's actually a really bad idea. I don't want to expand the business in that direction. Let's move it more in this other direction. Yeah, and I'll just echo what was said before around you're going to repeat yourself, and that's okay. Yeah, I don't know if that answered enough of that, but yeah.
Yeah. And so for all of you, what would you say the biggest benefit of this? Obviously money, but talk to us about some of the other benefits. And would you recommend this grant to other farmers? Anybody can start. Go ahead, Cam.
I'll speak to that. Yeah, I would agree with Grayson. I think it's a great exercise in looking at your business and what you're doing already and how are you looking to expand or not. And yeah, I think it really did help me think about what do I want? Where do I want to take this? And how do I take what I'm already doing and utilize this amazing resource to help grow our overall business? So, it is, it's intimidating, but I would say the benefit if you are awarded a grant is like amazing. I couldn't have anticipated how much of just the relief of knowing I'm putting myself out there in this big way, and I have somebody who has my back, and I'm going to have that money coming back to me, but also the ability to really think about your business and where do you want it to grow, I think is great too. Really helpful.
Thank you. Dorcas, how about you?
You know, I will encourage each small farmer, like what Grayson is doing. You start there, just have an idea and you put it in place and get the help. And these programs, it's good for small farmers. I encourage anyone who's want to go into this, don't get discouraged. Start small, basic. You don't have to do everybody, other people that are doing. You just do it and simplify it. And then say, this is what I want to go. The help is out there. And there's so many resources with USDA to really get the small farmers, young people to maintain this, because the nation and the local, like Grayson is supplying the local people. I supply my pesto in Seattle, small stores and some restaurant here locally in Whidbey Island. And I build the community here in Whidbey Island by doing this, growing my beans and selling them to the local farmers market. When I develop my products based on the beans that they know already, and they know where I grow this thing, they go there and see. And that's local grown and the local customers supplying them there. And when I move to Seattle, I find my other customers, they're already there. So they said, yeah, we buy this in Whidbey Island. There we go. I put it in the store. And that's kind of like how I ended up really building the clientele and building customer base and documenting those customers that are really the local, the store. They interested. Then they contacted me. We want to buy your things. Oh, that's nice. But because I had a grant, I can produce more and supply those people, because they will supply for my transportation. I put it there. For my marketing, it was there. At least I had that backup. Like Cameron said, you have a backup. By that time, you push yourself. You push, you get employees, they work harder, you are there with them. I do the 99% of the work myself. And my employees, they do it. They're out there selling, and I train them how to sell the products, how to go there and market and stand there and store in the market, farmers market. I do a lot of Seattle farmers market and the local farmers market here. So I'm encouraging small farmers, young people. This is how we can support our communities. And the government is helping us to sustain this for the local food system. People eat local. I supply the food hub, Whidbey Island, and I'm going to go be in Skagit County next year. Skagit Food Hub, I'm gonna supply there. So these kind of things that that the young people can do, any product, like Grayson started with it, just kale, you can do that. I started mine with the kale chips. When the kale chips were in the boom, I simplified it. I made it say it's good. That's why it's even right now, it's still selling. It's one of my best sellers. I started exactly like that. So I'm encouraging everyone who don't get intimidated. The help is there. Grayson did it on her own. You guys can do it. And the help is there to sustain the local grown food in Washington. That's all my encouragement to everyone there. And diversify what you have, because as a farmer, you can't sell it raw and make it. You change something there, it's year round. You can sell it year round. It helps. Thank you for all. That's all I can say.
Thank you, Dorcas. Grayson.
Yeah, in terms of benefits, I'm still pretty new. I just submitted my first draw. But I can say again that the process definitely helped, again, that thinking in a longer horizon of time. And it also, I think, really helped me take myself and my business more seriously. So what are some of the things that I've been doing, probably not as well as a professional could be doing, that if, I had the money to do that, I would take on. So things like having, a better bookkeeper, with a more regular relationship there. Things like that you may be doing right now, and you may say to yourself you may continue to do that. But I think for me, it's one of the most important things to me with this farm business is that all of the work and the money that I'm getting from my own money and from USDA or other funds, that this is a resource that can live for longer than however long I'm going to farm for. So how do we continue, how do I build Pink Moon, name of my farm, into something that's providing really great jobs for the folks that are working for me, and is something that if someone else wants to take it, can do that as I age or however my life continues to go. And I think the money and the support from a grant like this creates the conditions where all of that is a little easier. And I think sometimes as farmers, or not sometimes, we often undervalue ourselves. And my encouragement would just be like, go for it, ask for the help. And I, similar to what Dorcas was saying, would love to see more farm businesses that are accessing this money, that are becoming more resilient, more supported. So yeah, I think it's a really great opportunity, and it's been great so far, and I hope it continues to be. So yeah.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate the three of you. It's so great to hear your stories and to have you participate in this with us. I next want to turn to, you're probably thinking what you probably, your mind is going with all kinds of different projects that you could do. So I want to go through the application process for you. So step one, this is not like Carlotta and Jeff did the official USDA rural development rules part, but now here I'm just going to go forward with advice. So my advice would be, first step, determine your value added project. What do you already produce? You're going to be far better off doing a market expansion grant than an emerging market grant or a planning grant, because you're already producing it. You know what your markets are, you know what your potential is, and then ask yourself, can you produce and sell more of it? You need to be able to sell more product to more people in more places for a market expansion. And then the next thing I ask people to do is to think hard about how you can narrow the scope of your application to maximize your grant ask. So once you get approved for an application for a particular project, you can never come back and get approved for that again. So the most heartbreaking ones that I have seen is where someone has submitted an application and gotten funded for, every variety of mushrooms that they raise, right? And they named every single one. Well, now they can't come back and ask for another application. Or someone else who said, we're going to produce yogurt and we're going to produce strawberry, blueberry, boysenberry, and they named off 10 varieties of yogurt. Well, in the end, in the project, they were only able to execute on 2 or 3 of those, but because they named them in their application, they now can't come back and do a second application. So really try and narrow it. If you're raising chickens for eggs and sheep and beef, what do you sell the most of? Pick one of those projects that you sell the most of, that you can produce more of and sell more of, particularly if you have a waiting list or people who would love to be buying from you but can't currently. And just narrow your application to that so that you can come back and ask again. And then the last question there would be, what value added methodology should you use? Which one makes the most sense for you? Which one tells the most compelling story? If you're selling something and it's certified organic, or you used traditional methods from your home country to produce that, tell that story and as an enhanced method. Not everybody has to be turning something from a raw commodity into something in a jar or a can. As we saw with Grayson's story, just selling it locally, selling your product locally, and USDA defines local as within 400 miles of your farm or within the state that you live in. So if you're selling it there And then you've added value to it. People are going to pay more in Washington State for something grown by a local farmer than something grown outside of the state and shipped in. And so you can show that you've added value to that. So pretty much almost everybody is eligible for a value-added producer grant. Okay, so that's step 2, choose your value-added methodology. So here's the 5 methods again. Change in physical state. That's what everybody thinks of with value-added. You're turning it from a berry into a jam. Enhanced production methods. That's that selling it as certified organic. Physical segregation. Don't worry about that one. Nobody ever does that. Renewable energy, like Carlotta said, there's much better programs out there available for that. Or locally produced food products. So if you're doing a food product and selling it locally, it is adding value. But notice that this one has to be food. If you have something such as flowers or wool, you're going to need to do that in either change of state or enhanced production method, and that is a little bit more challenging to write. Okay, so going back over the key ones again, change in physical state. This is an irreversible process that alters the commodity and enhances its value, right? We have something, you can never go back to that uncut apple again. Enhanced production. This is organic, free range, those kinds of things. This is a lot of repetition, I know. Locally produced food product. So you're marketing or selling it within 400 miles or within the state. Again, that has to be a food. Okay, so step 3, you really need to understand your current numbers. So how much have you produced of that in the last 3 years? If you don't have great records, this is going to be more challenging for you than someone who has been keeping great records. But go back and see what you can figure out. What have you done in the last 3 years? How much have you sold? How many pounds have you produced? How many dollars have you gotten? And how much more can you produce in the next 3 years? You're going to, for a strong application, you're going to need to be able to show that you can produce more and sell more in the next 3 to 5 years. You're going to apply for up to a 36-month grant. I would recommend no more than a 2-year grant so that you have that room to ask for an extension. 36 months is a hard end. And if you haven't spent all your money by then, it is just lost. And nobody wants to see that. Your local rural development office does not want to see that money have to go back into Washington, D.C. They want those dollars to stay here in Washington. So best to apply for a 2-year grant with the option of having an extension. So know what your sales have been. How much growth can you achieve? Really think hard about who new customers are that you haven't reached yet. New restaurants, grocery stores, maybe add another farmer's market, maybe sell into the Puget Sound Food Hub and reach people all along the I-5 corridor, right? There's other sources, if you have some assistance here, that you might be able to go find those new customers. And then who are your current customers? How many customers do you currently have? And who would buy from you if you had more to sell? So these are the kind of numbers that you're going to need to put together a strong application. Okay. Step 4, make sure your business licenses are all current. Do you have all the appropriate business licenses? Obviously, you don't want to apply for a federal program if you are hiring people under the table. There's, as a farmer, I can tell you all kinds of reasons why you don't want to do that. But in this example, you definitely don't want to continue to do that if that is something you have been doing when you're applying for a federal grant. You need to either be a U.S. citizen or live in the U.S. legally, and there is a question on the application for that. So if that does not apply to you, then don't apply for this grant. Do you have the authority to act on behalf of your organization? There are some cases where there are multiple owners or family members involved. Make sure that you have the authority to apply for this grant before you do it, because it's an awful lot of work only to find out after you turn it in that you were not the person who was eligible to apply. Are you current on your IRS tax filings? This is both you personally and your business. And do you have any IRS judgments against you? If either of those are true, don't apply. Get that figured out and straightened up first. So This program, I have to say, is the closest thing to free money for farmers that's out there. So many of the grant programs really are about helping people who help farmers rather than helping the farmers directly. This one really is for the farmers, but you do need to make sure that your ducks are in a row before you apply. Okay, so step 5, do you currently have a business plan or a marketing plan for your value-added product? If not, this is a great time to put one of those together. For a simplified application, you don't need to have one of those, but I would still highly recommend it. By the time you're done with the application, you will basically have written a business plan in the application, so it's a great place to start. Put one of those together. For a market expansion grant, which is what all of our panelists were. They were all market expansions. Some of them were simplified applications, but they still were all market expansions. But for a market expansion between $50,000 and $250,000, you have to have a written business or marketing plan, and you can put that together. And ABC has a template for a marketing plan that I created that is specifically designed for applying for a value-added producer grant, and we can share that with you after this this webinar as part of the things that we will send out to you. If you want to do a market expansion project, and that is something where you have not been producing and selling it for 2 years, you have to have a feasibility study that is created by an independent third-party consultant. You should expect to spend probably $12,000 to $15,000 to have a good one produced. So if that is your intent, then you'll need to identify that professional. I would say get going on that right away. Okay, step 6, begin working on your application. So the application period is not open yet. They will open it when they open it. It happens one year. It happened on December 15th, but typically it happens February or March of each year with a due date in April or May. The application does not change very much from year to year. So I would say it is never too early to start. I would recommend starting now. If you haven't started one already, get through the holidays maybe, and then get started on one. This tends to be a slower time of year for a lot of farmers. So get going on the template, get going on creating a business plan or a marketing plan, putting those numbers together, and then you'll be ready when they open it. I appreciated how Jeff said that if you send them an application early before you send it in for real, they will review it. So my recommendation is get your applications put together now. And as soon as the application period opens, go back through it, change anything that's changed from, the previous year's template, and get it turned in. The earlier you give it to rural development agents, the better the feedback will be that they can give you. They're very busy people. They have lots of other programs that they are administrating, but they give really good feedback when you give them time to do it. If you come to them 2 days before the application is due and say, hey, can you look this over and give me some input before I submit it? That's not fair to them. They're not going to be able to do that for you. But if you turn it in 4 weeks before the application deadline and say, hey, just, give me some eyes on it, give me a grade, they're going to give you great feedback, and you're going to want to incorporate all of that feedback before you turn it in for real. Okay, so what do you need in order to complete your application? The very first thing you should do is get a UEI number, Universal Entity Identifier. This is available through sam.gov, and this number allows you to receive federal grant money. Don't just Google SAM, go to sam.gov. You never have to pay for this service. This is a free service of the federal government. And if somebody offers to help you with it and you pay them money to do it, don't do that. That is a scam and unnecessary. You can do that on your own, but it can take a little bit of time. So I would say do that. Even if you aren't thinking about doing a VAPG, just go get this UEI number so that you're ready when the grant project that you're most interested in opens up, then you'd be ready to apply. Okay, so then the next thing I say that you can work on would be a project budget. How are you going to spend $500,000 over a 2 to 3 year period? What expenses are you going to have that will help you produce that value-added product and meet more customers? You're going to want to think hard about projections of how much more can you produce. You know, you're already producing a number, you had your records from this year. How much more could you produce 24, 25, 26, 20, 27? And then how much more can you sell? Obviously, those numbers are tied together. Who are you going to sell this product to? Think about who your potential customer is. Create a list of people that you want to target. If you have a waiting list of people who have been wanting to buy from you and haven't been able to, that is a great place to start. But, you know, think even beyond that of like, what new customers can you acquire that you don't have now if you had some help? You're going to need letters of support for your project. So you're going to need letters of support from people who are current customers. Obviously, they need to be happy customers. You're going to need letters of support from new customers that have not been buying this product from you yet, but who want to when you have more available as a result of this market expansion, if you're doing a market expansion, or emerging market if it's something new. And then you're also going to need letters of support for anyone who is key to helping you complete the project. So if you're going to redesign your website, you're going to need a scope of work and a letter of support from your web designer. If you want to have your labels redesigned, the same thing. If you are receiving support from a nonprofit such as NABC, you know, we would be able to help you write a letter. So 3 different categories of letters that you will need as part of your application. You're going to need a business or marketing plan, except for the simplified application, but I would say I would still recommend writing one regardless. You're going to need verification that your business is in good standing. So you're going to need to make sure your licensing is all up to date, and you're going to need to be able to show that. And you're going to need to be able to show that you have the in-kind matching. I hope you haven't gotten intimidated by the idea of having to come up with $250,000 as a match. Very rarely do people do that in cash. Usually that is done in the value of the commodity, like we talked about earlier, by looking at the Agricultural Marketing Service website, or by doing some evaluations in the local grocery store, and by the value of the owners and family labor. So those are the places where I work with people on seeing how much of a match they can get. It's very rare that someone is not able to get to the full match with those 2 sources. Okay. So here is what the website looks like to get your UEI number. You go to www.sam.gov and you're going to click on Get Started, the green there. Okay, after you click Get Started, you are going to choose Register for Financial Assistance Awards only. You're probably not going to be bidding on federal contracts and procurements, and it's not enough just to get a unique entity ID. In order to apply for this grant, you're going to need to click on the button, Register for Financial Assistance Only. And after that, it should be fairly self-explanatory, but I just wanted to show you those 2 pieces. First, go to sam.gov and then click on Register for Financial Assistance Awards, and then just keep filling out the information there. Okay, so
Melissa,
yes,
Jeff
Jeff,
Peterson
thank
here,
you.
just chiming in on the UEI
Thank you.
with Sam there. Just as you're going through that process, make sure that they're going to ask for tax ID and, you know, the name that you operate under. I can't emphasize enough to make sure that that is consistent with your application. We're going to pull that UEI by the tax ID number throughout the application and the draw process and that sort of thing. And you know, I've seen a variety of things where we had different names or a tax ID number that comes into play there. Just you know, as you go through that, just make sure you're consistent with that.
Thank you for that, Jeff. That is really important. You don't want to be disqualified because, you know, your farm name that you used in your application was different than how you had originally created that name for the IRS. Okay, So it currently is not open, but when the value-added producer grant period opens, this is the website that you'll go to. The easiest thing to do is just to Google rural development, VAPG. That'll take you right here to the rural development website. And this is what the value-added producer grant page will look like, except it will have a new application deadline for 2024. If we scroll down this page, you can see kind of at the bottom, it says overview to apply other requirements. We click on to apply. This is where it's going to talk to you about doing the SAM application. If you are concerned that you might not have gotten to the sam.gov on your own, there's a hyperlink here on Rural Development's page. I would say just click on that. In addition, Rural Development puts out these amazing toolkits for helping you fill out all the information that you need. They have a planning toolkit and a working capital toolkit. You know, it guides you through everything that they're looking for. And I would say, like other people have said, read the instructions carefully on each section and give them exactly the information that they want. Too many people want to talk about their alluvial soils and certain things that frankly USDA doesn't necessarily care about. What they want to know is how much are you going to produce? Who are you going to sell it to? How much money are you going to bring back to the farm? You know, all the different pieces that they're asking for, answer their questions completely. Look at all the key words they have. That technical feasibility and operational feasibility is huge. That's 30 points out of the application. What I like to do with clients is I say, let's take every word that USDA put in their description there and create a bullet point. And then we're going to write a paragraph that addresses that bullet pointed item that USDA has said that they consider part of that they want you to address so that you don't miss anything. But those toolkits are amazingly helpful. Okay, so just some reminders. The Value Added Producer Grant Program is not a technical assistance program. This isn't about teaching you how to farm. It's not a job training program. They're not going to, you know, that's not what it's intended for. Not intended to teach people how to farm. It's not intended as a continuous stream of capital. We don't want to write an application that you cannot continue to produce after that grant money is gone. While I love to see people apply back to back and get multiple value-added producer grants for new projects, you do really need to think really carefully of, can you continue to sell that product after the grant money is gone and make a profit at it? If you can't, then maybe this isn't the right thing for you to be doing, or maybe you need to come up with a better product, right? I mean, if it's not sustainable on its own after USDA does this great infusion of money to help you get that next leg up to do more of it, then yeah, don't do that. And it's not for equipment and it's not for real estate. Everybody wants money for a tractor. I get it. Everybody wants money to improve their barn. What I would say to that is that's not what this program is for. However, you know, allow them to pay for the things that they want to pay for, right? They want to help you access new markets. They want to help you with that by helping to pay for your labels and your bottles and your boxes and all those other things that you're going to have to pay for anyway. Apply for funds for that. When you get the reimbursement, that money is yours to do whatever you want with. You know, for my third VAPG, the one for selling more eggs to more people in more places, I then took that money and put it in a savings account until I had enough to build a new barn, a new processing facility, you know, as a part of that. It's your money. Use it to improve your farm in other ways. Go to Hawaii, you know, pay yourself well. Those monies that come back to you are yours. But don't write those things into your application. Write the things into the application that are eligible expenses. Okay, so again, we want to stress the purpose of the grant. This grant is to help agriculture producers successfully process, market, and sell value-added products. And remember, USDA defines value-added in a much broader way than most of us think about. It's designed to expand markets for you as agricultural producers, and it's designed to strengthen rural economies. This grant is really, Congress critters love to get up and say, I saved the small family farm. I created jobs in the rural community. I brought more money back to the family farmer. That's you. Let's take that. Let's take that money and grow your farm to be able to feed more people in our community. Okay, so any questions that have come up through all of this, either from the USDA presentation, from the farmer panel, questions for me? I see one in the chat. Can the farmers and Jeff speak to grant submission draws that are not qualified? Are they single submission disqualified? Or does single submission affect the entire grants funds already distributed in future? Jeff, does that question make sense to you?
Are they talking about the frequency in which they request draws, or
I'm not sure. Fernando, can you unmute and ask your question out loud?
Yeah, you mentioned that there's stuff that is not qualified, and somewhere along the line you may have a submission of something that turns out that it's not. So is that single line item then precluded from draw, or does it impact the entire loan thereafter, or grant rather thereafter?
Right. So, yeah. So I would say there's two pieces to that. Sorry, Jeff, I'll let you go ahead.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say, Melissa. There's two different kind of where that comes into play, two different ways. And in the front end, if there are say your program, your budget includes ineligible costs, if they're exceed, I think it's 10%, that can deem the application ineligible. If you've got things in there that are clearly not eligible, that can affect the application from even moving on to scoring. If it's awarded, and this happens at times, we get an expense that could is ineligible for some reason or another. We kind of sift through that, and we may just exclude it from that from that draw. We're unable to pay for that because the regulation, the grant 2 CFR is really the which shouldn't mean anything to anybody, but it's a kind of our guidelines as to what federal dollars, grant dollars can pay for, and what they can. And there are some things that are excluded. I think, again, I know I kind of harped on it during my little section there on, making sure that it's directly related to the project. Here's an example. A lot of times, we'll see, like a fuel bill, and then we might come back and say, well, is this for a delivery truck that is only used for that, or is it also used, in the course of production? And there are just certain kind of strategies you can do to avoid some of that. One method might be using mileage, because like the federal rate for mileage in theory covers, the gas, the maintenance, the even the insurance, and all those kinds of things are what they use to kind of lump together a reimbursement. And so, if you in the front end of this thing, as you're projecting this, and you say, well, we're going to be going to 5 markets per week, and what is and you can project what that mileage is in the front end. And that way we're not having to look at like an auto insurance policy, or looking at every gas receipt. I know for me, when I go get gas, I might go in and I've got a corn dog on there or something that clearly isn't, or a phone bill. Sometimes those phone bills, you've got to I've seen like a subscription to some other a streaming service or something. And so, you know, again, as you think about this in the front end, if you can kind of make those projections, and that's all they are, is projections. We understand that. Some of that may change. You know, you may go to more markets than that or less markets than that. But if in the case of you know, mileage or something like that, and you're actually asking for a reimbursement, we might just have you, you know, kind of keep a mileage log and say, we went to these markets these certain days, and you know, and this was that. And it really makes it easy for you and us in the reimbursement process. And going to the root of your original question, there is, it might help weed out ineligible things that don't really line up with the project. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. So Laura asks, do you not need to submit expenses for reimbursement? How does the reimbursement process work? I'd say, yes, you do need to submit receipts for your expenses. But Jeff or Carlotta, would one of you like to talk about how the reimbursement process works? Oh, Carlotta, you're muted.
Thanks. Sure. So the reimbursement process would begin as soon as you have expenses for which you can show matching funds. So let's say, I don't know, keep it simple. You've got some marketing costs that you have paid for. You've done some in-kind work on your processing yourself. Maybe you've paid a couple of bills that are attributed to the project. So when you have enough to make a reimbursement and you can show your match, either cash or your in-kind or whatever match you have mentioned in your application, then you just submit the necessary forms. And upfront, I think we kind of alluded to that, Jeff did. We're going to have quite a thorough conversation with you if you're awarded the grant. We're going to give you an Excel spreadsheet and ask you to submit and track all of your expenses in the different categories, as well as the matching funds, cash or in-kind, that kind of thing. And then you're going to submit the receipts or the invoices. And maybe gas is one of them. Some people actually just submit receipts for the gas, and some people have a tracking thing where they're showing how many miles they went to, you know, farm to market, or whatever's part of the project. So depending on your specific project, we'll talk to you about how you're going to do that and how that's going to fit into the spreadsheet, the Excel spreadsheet. And then the form itself where you're requesting the reimbursement is a federal form, and we'll talk about and help you set that up to begin with and how that works moving forward. So you can ask for a reimbursement as often as monthly, and some people do that. I do recommend you don't wait too long, especially your first draw. Don't wait past a month or two to do your first draw, because you know, it's just a lot easier to get yourself established right away. And you do have whoever is working with you on your grant, you will have that opportunity to discuss it and share the forms and you know, present it to see if you think you have it correct and all that. So we are going to do some hand holding, especially in the beginning. And then typically, once we have a good reimbursement request with all the documentation we want, we are usually looking at that and getting it processed, and the funds will be in your bank account. I'm going to say typically in 2 to 3 weeks, maybe sometimes sooner, but that's a typical.
Yeah, thank you for that, Carlotta. I would say, you know, like Carlotta said, don't hesitate to get that first one. And the first one's going to be the hardest one. And your rural development agent will walk you through it. If you did something wrong, they'll help you. They're going to, you know, be there for you as your advocate. They're definitely there, not as an enforcer, but as someone to help you get this money that's been assigned to you. And sometimes people ask me, you know, when should I do, how often should I do that? And for me, the answer was always when the pain of putting the paperwork together was worth the dollar value of the reimbursement. $500, maybe not. $10,000, okay, I can take the next 3 or 4 hours to put receipts all in order that I haven't done for the last month.
The
Okay.
smaller the reimbursement, the less time it takes to add up all those receipts too, so.
That's a very good point. That's a
Relative.
good point. I could have been more organized, I guess. Lisa asks, our largest labor post-harvest crops are salad, carrots, and marigold garlands. Do you see any issues combining a food crops with a floral crop for a market expansion application? Carlotta, do you want to answer? Oh, you're muted.
I was going to say, I'm not sure the 2 different types would be in one grant. They probably would be, if it's locally, if you're using locally as the method. So it's kind of a loaded question, I guess. But maybe, do you have an example, Melissa?
Yeah, I would say don't do that. I don't make this one application. Pick whichever one of those 3 is your biggest revenue producer that you can produce more of over the next several years, and just focus your application on one of those. The good news about that is then you have 2 more applications for future years, right? You've got one for 2024, one for 2027, and one for 2030. And it would be a very challenging application to write, having to address all 3 of those separately throughout the application, as well as tracking. We want to keep things really simple in your application for you and for the reviewer, as well as for you when you're going to get your reimbursement draws. We just don't want it to be too complicated. And that feels complicated to me, particularly since you couldn't apply for locally grown because of the marigolds. That would make you ineligible right there. So let's just do salad to start, or whichever one of those is the biggest dollar value. Adam says, you mentioned that in-kind contributions can cover a large portion, if not all, of the match requirements. Can you give some examples of how in-kind contributions have helped with the match requirement with respect to the planning grant? Ooh, that's an interesting question. Carlotta or Jeff, do you want to?
So the in-kind, you cannot provide in-kind on planning because that's not an eligible cost for the grantee applicant.
Yeah, you'd have to come up with cash. I mean, that's the weird thing. The hard thing about a planning grant is you have to have, right? I mean, Carlotta, you have to pay for half of whatever the expenses are that you get funded. And putting the application together, you've put together at least a beginning feasibility study. So for me personally, I recommend, unless you're a larger producer group, think instead about working capital rather than planning, unless you have a brand new large project that you are willing to put up $20,000 to $75,000 of your own money, and then have that matched as part of the planning grant to help you decide if something is really worthwhile, and to do a big feasibility study. Okay, can your in-kind match be your labor to produce the raw commodity? No, this grant covers everything post-harvest, or everything even more specifically outside of harvest. So you're going to want to draw a really clear line in the sand that says we are done producing this product. We're now not going to use the word production because it's a trigger word, and we're only going to talk about post-harvest activities. So you can do the labor to process it, to wash it, to package it, to store it, to sell it, to advertise it, to distribute it. Those would be in-kind match, but your time spent in the field actually growing it does not count. There are no expenses in a working capital grant that have anything to do with producing the product, just selling it. Will the value of all the carrots we grow count as a match, or just the additional carrots we plan to grow beyond the amount we are currently growing? And that's actually a really good question. And I would say it's all of them. That, you know, if you're writing an application to sell more carrots to more people in more places, then the commodity value of those carrots before you sell them would be covered. And I see Jeff unmuted and he has something to say.
Yeah, I agree with that. The only caveat would be is it needs to be aligned with your project. So if you were taking those carrots and doing something different with them, selling them through some other means that weren't part of this project, then I would say no. Does that make sense?
I think it does. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Karen asks, if you are not married to the producer, but live in the household, are you considered a quote family member when looking at in-kind matching versus labor expense?
I was going to look that up, but I do believe that the person would be considered the family member when it comes to the in-kind.
Yeah, they could have a beneficial interest in the outcome of the project. I think that's where it kind of turns into that rather than a, you know, some formal relationship.
Mm-hmm.
I think whenever you are asking yourself the question, does this qualify under conflict of interest? It probably does, right? If you're even asking the question. So one question that often comes up is, well, my nephew is a professional web designer. Can I hire him and have that be an eligible expense? Well, you know, maybe he's a professional, maybe he's not, but he is family. And so that could be an in-kind contribution, but I would say probably is too much on the edge to be an eligible expense. Same thing with somebody that you consider somehow part of your family. Best to just put them on the in-kind matching. You can pay your family members with your own funds. You just can't get reimbursed by USDA for that. So my recommendation would be just to have that be part of your in-kind contribution that you need to include. Michelle says, I'm having a huge epiphany in your explanation of matching money being in kind. I never realized this before and was always stressed about how to have the matching cash. I'm still digesting the idea. Maybe you can elaborate more on how this gets projected and documented. So the way it gets projected in your application is you are going to take Jeff's advice and go to the Department of Labor and see what a business manager makes in Washington State. You know, what is the average wage of someone who is running a business, and that is the wage that you would attribute to your in-kind labor for running your business. You're going to look at what does, you know, if you're making wine, what does a professional winemaker make? If you had to go pay somebody to do the things that you're going to do, that would be the dollar value you would attribute to your time. And then you're going to do projections on how many hours are you going to spend in the processing room, making sales phone calls, driving the delivery truck. You're going to come up with those numbers and figure out how much of your time is going to be spent in post-harvest activities. And then we're going to take that dollar value per hour, multiply it times the number of hours over the life of your project, and that will be your labor in kind that we are projecting. For your commodity in kind, you're going to go to the AMS website and see what your commodity is worth before you add value to it by selling it locally. What does the AMS say a pound of blueberries is worth? And then you are going to contribute those blueberries to this value-added product as an in-kind contribution. It's this really great accounting thing, you know, that you get to call it an expense and then you get to sell it again. So in my case with the eggs, I figured out that my eggs, can't remember the exact number, but I want to say it was like they were worth $2.97 a dozen. So I would produce, 1,000 dozen and then multiply that 1,000 dozen times $2.97. And that was my in-kind contribution. Then I got to turn around and sell them for I think my average price at the time was $7.75 a dozen. But that's how you would document that. So you would do your projections in your application, make your best guesses, thinking of the years ahead. And then if you get funded, you're going to keep a production record and a labor log where you're going to say, okay, on, Wednesday, whatever date, I spent 8 hours processing this. And then I spent 4 hours at the farmer's market. And you're going to create a labor log and you're going to give a total showing the days that you worked and contributed to the project. You're going to show a production log. So in my case with the eggs, it would be this many eggs were, were counted up on each day in the month. And then I take that total and come up with the value of how many dozens I produced at the $2.97, show that in a production log, and then submit that as part of my reimbursement of I contributed my time, I contributed my eggs, and now here are receipts for my distribution costs, the carton cost, the label cost, as well as the people that I hired to do those activities. And then I get reimbursed for all those other expenses. Anything you want to add, Carlotta or Jeff?
No, I think that was really good. Just to go back to, and you'll see this along the way, is the in-kind labor match cannot exceed 25% of the whole project. So if you had $100,000 project, 50,000 of it was grant funds and 50,000 is match. That in-kind labor could not exceed 25,000 in that particular example.
Okay, Laura says the grant is due in May. When would we hear if our grant is accepted, and when would the grant period start? So I want to back up and say we don't know when the grant applications will be due. They have not announced the 2024 application period opening up yet. It was due in May last year. It'll probably be April or May. Typically it's April or May for a due date, and it is a hard due date. It's no, oh, I'm sorry, my computer failed. Can I turn it in the next day? It's like, nope, you gotta meet the deadline. So whenever it's due, probably sometime in April or May, then it will go into the review process. And if you were successful, you will probably hear in late August or sometime in September, because the federal fiscal year begins October 1st. So when you're writing your application, you're going to write it for a grant period starting October 1st, 2024 or later. Carlotta or Jeff, any more insight on that?
That sounds good to me. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Let's see. So Helsing Farm says our farm processed dry beans in the past, but hasn't for several years now. Would we be required to conduct a feasibility study if we were intending to apply for processing beans? Also, would processing equipment for dried beans or seeds qualify for funding? So starting with, you've done it in the past, you've produced it for more than 2 years, but you haven't in recent years. So I think the question is, would they be eligible for a market expansion grant? Carlotta or Jeff, do you want to address that?
Well, I'm thinking if they're not presently doing growing the beans and haven't for, does it say in there, several years they haven't, then I don't want to answer for sure, but I think that you'd be kind of starting over as far as how long you've been producing for that 2-year benchmark. Jeff, maybe you can answer that also, and then then we can move on to equipment.
Yeah, I don't know that I have an exact answer on that one. We might follow up. I would tend to agree with what Carlotta had said there, but I don't know if there's any hard and fast rules on the recency in which you would have had to been growing that product.
Yeah, so those are the regulatory answers. My advice as someone who would just be assisting potentially in an application would be, it wouldn't necessarily be a strong application, that I would encourage you to, if you are going to get back into processing beans, do that first. Do that for 2 years and then come back and apply. If you're putting in your application, we did this, we stopped doing it, you'd have to really explain why and why you think you would be able
Yeah,
to be successful now.
that is a really good point, Melissa. Those are the kinds of things, kind of those gray areas, aside from the regulatory rules there, is people scoring these when they're looking at that part of the scoring section that talks about technical feasibility, that you're showing your ability to do it. And like I say, there's 3 different folks scoring these, and that may be more challenging to support in that example than, had you been doing it in recent years.
Yeah, you need a really good story, I would think, that would explain why you could be successful now and why what the gap was. Kind of like in a resume. Why is this gap in your resume? And then the second part of their question, would processing equipment for dried beans or seeds qualify for funding? I think the answer to that is, equipment is not a part of this grant. Supply, meaning a thing that is less than $5,000 and has a useful life of less than 1 year, would qualify. Is that how you would define the difference, Jeff and Carlotta?
I think it's a tricky area, because like Carlotta pointed out, when you start putting processing equipment that could be interlinked and related and, individually worth less than that threshold, but, collectively, might exceed that. I think when we, think it'd be a good idea to have that discussion with us and kind of see, what those equipment items are in the front end. The other, the other items we've talked about, packaging and a lot of the more working capital things are more intuitive, and it does, just because of those limitations that are written into our rules for equipment, we don't want to, get you, have you get something there that could create an ineligible cost. I mean, we try and be as liberal as we can with that. But it is one of those items that we always, when we see equipment in there, because that really was, when this grant was set up, was not, probably in the spirit of it, but over time we've had to kind of make some interpretations of that. And at the end of the day, we're kind of stuck with what our grant regulation says overall for equipment, and that's where we kind of fall into that whole discussion. So I really recommend that if you have that kind of scenario that would involve those kinds of things, that maybe we have those discussions in the front end.
Excellent, thank you. That is all the questions that we have. I love working on value-added producer grant applications. I love getting to work with farmers, food producers, ranchers, fishers, anyone who is helping to feed us all and feed us all better food. If you have an application that you would like some assistance with, feel free to reach out to me here, melissa@agbizcenter.org. In addition, you will be receiving an evaluation form. We would very much appreciate it if you would fill that out. That is part of our reporting to our funders who put these webinars on. So would very much appreciate if you would do that. again, here's some of our sponsors. And thank you so much for Carlotta and Jeff for you being here. I didn't expect you to have to give us your entire morning, and I so appreciate that, and so appreciate your support for all the farmers and everything that you do for us.
Yeah, we
Thank you,
appreciate it on
Melissa.
our end. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you to our farmer panel too. I appreciate you all taking the time out of your busy days to come join us.
Very much.
Yeah,
Thank you
yeah.
so much, Melissa.
Thank you. Thank you all. And with that, we will go ahead and stop recording and sign out. So have a wonderful